Mr. Ronaldo, let's talk about Las Vegas, 2009, and why you paid money for that woman's silence. Dead silence fell over the studio. The producer was shouting something about a commercial break into the earpiece, but Veronica ignored him. Ronaldo's eyes narrowed slowly, and for the first time that evening, something truly dangerous appeared in them. A cold, controlled fury of a man pushed to his limit. He leaned forward, locked eyes with Veronica, and spoke quietly but distinctly. "You just crossed the line, Miss Page." The studio froze. Every viewer on the other side of the screen could feel the shift in the air. This was the moment when the interview stopped being just an interview. It became a battle. The most exciting part is coming next. Stay with us to find out how it all ends. Meanwhile, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't lose track. What if everything you knew about the greatest modern footballer was just the tip of the iceberg? When a journalist from a top American channel tried to corner Cristiano Ronaldo with her questions, she couldn't imagine that this interview would change her career forever. The American Truth Studio glowed with a cool blue light. There were 30 minutes left before the broadcast, but Veronica Page was already sitting in her chair, studying the question cards. In 15 years of working in television, she had earned a reputation as a killer journalist, someone who could break any guest, making them either cry or lose their temper. Today's interview was supposed to be the icing on the cake of her career. "My God, camera 3 a little to the left," she commanded, not even looking up from her notes, "and dim the light on the guest's chair by 20%. I want to see every drop of sweat on his face." The team followed the instructions without question. No one dared to argue with Veronica, especially today. She had been hunting for this interview for a month, had rejected 3 other premiere broadcasts with Hollywood stars, all for the sake of one person, Cristiano Ronaldo. "Have we checked the tax information?" she asked her assistant, Jake, a skinny guy with a perpetually scared expression. "Yes, everything as you asked. 5 attack points. Tax issues in Spain, the scandal of 2019, his fatherly duties, the story with ex-girlfriends, and..." He hesitated. "So what?" Veronica looked up, impatience evident in her eyes. "And the topic of his mother." "But Veronica, are you sure? It's quite..." "Enough what?" Her voice became dangerously quiet. "Personal? Painful? That's exactly what I need. People don't tune into my show for boring stories about sports victories. They want blood, and today they're going to get it." Jake nodded and stepped back. He'd worked with Veronica long enough to know that arguing was pointless, especially when ratings were involved. "This guy thinks he's untouchable," Veronica continued, putting the cards down. "Always so perfect, so right. It's time America saw the real Cristiano Ronaldo." "But what if the real Ronaldo is the same as his public image?" Jake asked cautiously. Veronica laughed, a cold, almost metallic laugh. "Oh, sweet Jake, no one is that perfect. Everyone has skeletons in their closet. Some people are just better at hiding them, and my job is to open those closets." The team of stylists were finishing up Veronica's makeup when the producer's voice came through the earpiece. "He's here." The car just pulled up to the service entrance. Veronica smiled, the same smile that usually preceded the media execution of yet another celebrity. "Great. Let him wait in the waiting room for 5 minutes. I don't want him to feel too comfortable." Mike, the chief cameraman, shook his head. "No. Veronica, we're talking about Cristiano Ronaldo. The guy played in front of 80,000 hostile fans in enemy stadiums. 5 minutes in the waiting room is unlikely to break him." "Everyone can be broken, Mike," Veronica snapped, checking her reflection in the mirror. "It's just a matter of which buttons to push, and I know all his buttons." There was a slight noise from outside the studio doors. Veronica immediately straightened up, adopting her signature pose, confident, with a slight tilt of the head, radiating deceptive friendliness. "Welcome, Mr. Ronaldo," she said as the doors opened. Cristiano Ronaldo walked into the studio with a natural grace that distinguishes great sportsmen. He wore an impeccably tailored navy suit, a crisp white shirt, and a minimalist tie. Nothing flashy, none of the flamboyant accessories that the tabloids so love to attribute to him. "Miss Page," he nodded slightly, shaking her hand. "Pleased to meet you." His English was almost flawless, with a slight accent that gave his words a special melody. Veronica smiled professionally, noting his calm. Too calm for a man who should be nervous before a live broadcast. It was irritating. "Make yourself comfortable," she pointed to the chair opposite. "I hope the trip was pleasant?" "Quite," Ronaldo answered shortly, lowering himself into a chair with his back straight. Not a single unnecessary movement, no nervousness. His eyes carefully studied the studio. 3 minutes until airtime," the director announced. Veronica leaned closer to her guest, creating the illusion of a confidential conversation. "You know, Mr. Ronaldo, I have been hosting this program for 10 years, And I can say with confidence that sincerity is what viewers value most. I hope for an honest and open conversation. Cristiano smiled. That same famous smile that adorned hundreds of billboards around the world. I always tell the truth, Miss Page, even when it's inconvenient. Something in his tone made Veronica wary. Usually people were nervous before her interview. Even seasoned politicians and Hollywood stars fidgeted in their chairs, preparing for a verbal attack. But Ronaldo seemed completely relaxed, as if she, not he, was the target today. 1 minute until the broadcast. The director's voice brought Veronica out of her reverie. She straightened up, smiled professionally, and took one last look at her question cards. 9 months of painstaking research, dozens of anonymous sources, hundreds of hours of information gathering, all to destroy the perfect image of the man sitting across from her. 30 seconds. Veronica mentally repeated the plan. Start with innocent questions, lull them into a false sense of security, then gradually lead them to scandalous topics, not let them take the initiative, drive them into a corner. A classic scheme that worked flawlessly with hundreds of guests. 10, 9, 8. The team froze. The cameramen took up positions. All of America was tuning in to see the real Cristiano Ronaldo, the one Veronica was going to show them. 3, 2, 1. Ether. The music began to play in the studio. The cameras began to move smoothly, capturing a close-up of Veronica's face. Good evening, America. This is The Truth Hour, the show where celebrities show their true colors. I'm Veronica Page, and today we have a very special guest. Camera Thusher 2 panned to Ronaldo, who sat with a slight half-smile, exuding confidence and calm. They call him a phenomenon, a legend, an icon of world football. He earned more than $1 billion, won all possible trophies, and conquered millions of hearts. But who is he really? What is hidden behind the perfect smile and polished movements? Today we will find out the truth about Cristiano Ronaldo. Veronica paused, looking straight into the camera with an expression viewers had learned to recognize. The look of a hunter about to strike the killing blow. Mr. Ronaldo, she began with deceptive gentleness, you've built an empire, become the most recognizable athlete on the planet, influenced millions. Don't you think you were just lucky to be born with such talent? She said it with a practiced smile, the kind that made you wonder what was really behind it. But Ronaldo had seen this game before. Start softly, then plunge the knife in. He leaned forward slightly, his expression a mixture of confidence and a little amusement. You know, Miss Page, it's interesting that you ask specifically about luck, Ronaldo replied, his voice calm and measured. A lot of people like that word, luck. They use it to devalue success, to imply that hard work and sacrifice don't matter. But let me tell you something about luck. It doesn't build careers, it doesn't win championships, and it certainly doesn't get you up at 5 o'clock every morning to train when your peers are still asleep. Veronica noticed that the answer did not sound as she had hoped. Not defensive, but confident. But she continued the attack, her smile becoming a little more tense. So you're saying that you've achieved everything through hard work alone? No natural talent? No lucky breaks? She thought she would catch him in a contradiction, but Ronaldo was ready. I'm saying, he replied, his voice gaining intensity, that success comes to those who deserve it. Yes, I've been blessed with some natural gifts, but I've known dozens more talented than me who aren't even playing professionally now. I've spent sleepless nights recovering from injuries, made deals that seemed impossible, overcome obstacles that would have broken many others. But here's the really important thing, Ms. Page. I've never done it alone. This was the moment Veronica had been waiting for. Her eyes gleamed faintly, like a predator sensing its prey. Ronaldo had opened the door slightly, and now she was about to burst through with full force. Not alone, she asked with false curiosity, as if the question had just occurred to her. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about the people behind Cristiano Ronaldo. Camera 3 showed a close-up of Veronica's face, where that famous, I know more about you than you think smile was frozen. The cameraman smoothly moved the camera to Ronaldo, expecting to see signs of nervousness or defensiveness. But the footballer remained unperturbed. In fact, something like a slight grin flashed across his face, as if he saw through Veronica's strategy and found it amusing. A tense silence fell over the studio. The audience held their breath, sensing that this was the real interview, the one they had turned on their televisions for in prime time. Veronica Page versus Cristiano Ronaldo. A battle between a master of verbal manipulation and a man whose image was so flawless that it inspired instinctive mistrust. One of them would lose tonight, And it wouldn't just be a loss. It would be a public humiliation. I'm not sure I understand what you're talking about, Veronica finally answered, feigning naivety. You have an army of coaches, agents, managers, stylists. Didn't they create the Cristiano Ronaldo we know today? This was the first real attack, a direct blow to the most vulnerable point of any successful person, his authenticity. The assumption that behind his success is not he himself, but a team of professionals who have created an image that has nothing to do with reality. There was silence in the studio. Everyone waited for Ronaldo's reaction. It could determine the course of the rest of the interview. A second, 2, 3. Ronaldo tilted his head slightly, studying Veronica with a look that was difficult to decipher. Then he said slowly and calmly, "It's interesting that you see success like that, as if it were some kind of product that can be assembled on a conveyor belt. Yes, I have a team. Any professional has one. But do you know what a team does? It helps hone what already exists. It can't create something out of nothing." He paused, then added with a barely perceptible smile, "And this team is not the people I was talking about when I said that I was never alone on my path." Veronica felt annoyed. Ronaldo had not allowed himself to be cornered. In fact, he seemed to be playing some kind of game with her, but she was too experienced an interviewer to show it. "Who are you talking about, Mr. Ronaldo?" she asked, leaning forward slightly, creating the illusion of an intimate conversation. Ronaldo paused long enough for the crowd to stop breathing, but not so long that it looked like confusion. Then he uttered a single word. "Family." A simple word, spoken with such conviction that it sounded almost like a challenge. Veronica smiled again, but now there was something predatory in her smile. This was exactly what she had been waiting for. "Oh yes, your family," she said as if remembering something unimportant. "Of course they mean a lot to you, especially your mother, don't they?" It was another test shot. The topic of family has always been a sore point for celebrities. It was easy to step on a mine here, and Veronica hoped that Ronaldo himself would show where these mines were. Ronaldo's face froze for a moment, and Veronica knew she had hit the mark. She could almost feel the millions of viewers leaning forward in their seats. Everyone knew that behind Ronaldo's perfect image stood his mother, Dolores Aveiro, the woman who had raised him in poverty, supported his dreams, and become his rock. But it was precisely in such sacred themes that one could always find a crack. "Yes," Ronaldo answered simply. "My mother is the foundation of everything I have done and who I am." Veronica felt a little disappointed. The answer was too correct, too rehearsed, but she was just getting started. "You know what's interesting, Mr. Ronaldo?" she said, casually shuffling the question cards. "We know so much about you, your goals, your contracts, your cars, but so little about the woman you say made you who you are. Why do you think that is?" The blow was subtle but painful. The implication was that Ronaldo was using his mother's story as a beautiful legend, without giving her real recognition, without letting her into his world of fame and fortune. "Because she decided to," Ronaldo replied, and for the first time there was a steel in his voice. "And I respect her choice. Not everyone seeks fame, Miss Page. Some people are content to just be happy and see their loved ones happy." Veronica felt she had hit a soft spot. Family, mother. There was something here that Ronaldo didn't want to talk about, and she was going to dig deeper. "How noble of you," she said with a hint of irony. "But isn't it strange that the woman who, as you say, has given you everything, leads such a modest life herself, while you enjoy all the blessings of fame?" This was no longer a hint, but a direct accusation. The studio became so quiet that you could hear the cameras whirring. Ronaldo's face changed. Not much, but enough for those watching to notice. Something flashed in his eyes. Not anger, not resentment, but something deeper and more dangerous. "Miss Page," he began, his voice calm but each word filled with power, "you have a very interesting understanding of the word modest. My mother lives in a house I built for her. She has everything she could want. But you know what makes her truly special? That she doesn't need cameras to prove her worth. She doesn't need interviews to feel important. And she would never use other people's personal stories to boost ratings." The studio audience froze. This was no longer just an answer to a question. It was a challenge. Ronaldo looked straight into Veronica's eyes, and his gaze read, "I see your game, and I'm not going to play it." Veronica felt a chill run down her spine. This man was not like her other guests. He did not defend himself, did not justify himself. He attacked, but it was too late to retreat. Millions of spectators were waiting for blood, and she was going to spill it, no matter whose. "Very touching, Mr. Ronaldo," she said with a smile that made many guests weak at the knees. "But let's be honest. Your mother is the symbol of your success story. A poor boy from Madeira who made his dream come true thanks to the support of a selfless mother. Isn't that just a beautiful fairy tale created by your PR people? Isn't the truth more complicated? She paused, enjoying the moment, and then added with feigned concern, I just want to give you the opportunity to tell a real story, without gloss and Photoshop. It was the moment of truth. The cards were on the table. Veronica Page was openly asking Cristiano Ronaldo to admit that his image as the perfect son and family man was just a marketing ploy. That behind the flawless facade there was a completely different person. A person with flaws, mistakes, dark sides. A deafening silence fell over the studio. Veronica smiled triumphantly, confident that she had cornered her prey. Ronaldo slowly sat up in his chair. His face was impenetrable, but his eyes, there was a fire in them that had not been there before. A fire that made everyone in the studio feel uneasy. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word was clearly heard in the ringing silence of the studio. You know, Miss Page, I came here expecting a professional conversation. Questions about my career, my plans, even my mistakes. Everyone has them, but instead you're trying to denigrate the most sacred thing I have, my family, my mother. He paused, and there was more power in that pause than in any words. Then he continued, You want the truth without the gloss? Here it is. My mother worked as a cleaner so I could play football. She sometimes missed lunches so I could eat. She believed in me when no one else did. And when journalists like you try to turn this story into some dirty secret, it says a lot more about you than it does about us. Veronica felt the ground slipping from under her feet. This was no longer the conversation she had planned. She was no longer in control, but she was too experienced a predator to show weakness. Mr. Ronaldo, she began with mock sympathy. I didn't mean to offend you. No, Miss Page, Ronaldo interrupted, his voice now ringing with a force that shook the studio walls. You knew exactly what you were doing. You didn't come here today to hear the truth. You came to create a scandal, to find cracks where there are none, to make me say things I never said. He leaned forward, and at that moment, everyone in the studio, from producers to lighting technicians, realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. This was no longer a guest answering questions. This was a man taking control. But you know what, Miss Page? Ronaldo continued, his eyes blazing with a fire that made Veronica uneasy. I'm actually going to tell you the truth. The whole truth. The one you didn't expect to hear. Camera one focused on Veronica Page's face as she visibly struggled to regain control of the situation. Her trademark smile had turned into a strained grimace. Of course, Mr. Ronaldo, we all want to hear the truth, she said, frantically shuffling through her cards. Let's go back to your career. Many consider you the greatest footballer of all time, but critics say your success is based more on your commercial image than on real achievements. How do you feel about that? It was a classic Veronica move, changing the subject while simultaneously delivering a blow to the guest's ego. The studio audience held its breath. The director signaled the cameraman to zoom in on Ronaldo's face. Cristiano shook his head slowly, as if he were talking to a child who didn't understand the obvious. You know what's interesting, Miss Page? He said quietly. The way people use the word image when they talk about me, as if I'm just an image created by marketers. Let me ask you this. Have you ever watched a full game of mine? Not the YouTube highlight reel, but the actual 90 minutes on the pitch? Veronica blinked. She hadn't expected such a turn of events. Of course, I saw your performances, she began, but Ronaldo gently interrupted her. You haven't answered my question. 90 minutes, Miss Page. A full match. From whistle to whistle. The pause dragged on. The studio sank into awkward silence. Veronica realized that she had fallen into her own trap. I'm a journalist, Mr. Ronaldo, not a sports commentator, she finally answered with mock confidence. My job is to ask the tough questions, not... No, Ronaldo interrupted again, but without aggression, just stating the fact. And you know what? I don't blame you. 90 minutes is a long time. It's easier to watch a 3-minute video of my goals or read the tabloid headlines. But that's the problem, isn't it? He paused, looking directly into the camera, as if addressing not only Veronica, but also the millions of viewers behind the screens. Real football is not just about goals. It's about thousands of hours of training when no one is taking you off. It's about the pain of injuries that no one sees. It's about sleepless nights before big games. It's about moments of doubt that you overcome again and again. But people like simple stories, black or white, hero or villain, talent or PR. Veronica felt that she was losing control. Ronaldo was turning the interview into his personal monologue. It was necessary to change tactics immediately. These are very beautiful words, Mr. Ronaldo, she said with a slight smile. But let's be objective. Your annual income exceeds the GDP of some countries. You have private jets, villas all over the world, contracts with the biggest brands. Don't you think you're a little out of touch with most people's reality? She thought she had him cornered, made him justify his wealth to millions of ordinary people. But Ronaldo just smiled. Not his famous advertising smile, but something more genuine and unexpected. You know, Miss Page, I was 7 years old when I realized we were poor, he began quietly. Not just low on money, but really poor. My mother worked 2 jobs. My father struggled with alcoholism. There were 4 of us kids in a small house on Madeira. I often went to bed hungry in those years. The studio froze. Even the cameramen, accustomed to everything, held their breath. I remember the day I needed new boots, Ronaldo continued. The old ones were so worn out they bled. The coach said I couldn't continue without proper shoes. My mother cried that night. I could hear it through the thin wall. She couldn't afford them. The next day, she took on an extra shift as a cleaner. She worked for 2 weeks without much sleep. Veronica sat motionless, not daring to interrupt this confession. All right, when people say I'm out of touch, I remember those boots. I remember the look on my mother's face when she handed them to me. I remember vowing to myself that one day she would never cry about money again. So yeah, I have a plane. I have houses. I have contracts. But you know what I also have? Memory and gratitude. The studio became so quiet you could hear someone sniffle. Veronica sensed that the story was spinning out of control. Instead of a revealing interview, it was becoming some kind of Christmas fairy tale about a poor boy who made himself. This was not what her audience paid cable for. It's a very touching story, Mr. Ronaldo, she said with false sympathy. But you must admit, it's a pretty standard narrative for sports celebrities. Tough childhood, hard work, well-deserved success. Perhaps you could tell us something that's not in your official biography? For example, about your tax problems in Spain? Or about your, shall we say, difficult relationships with some women? She dropped the bomb with ruthless directness, confident that she had finally penetrated his defenses. Ronaldo's eyes flashed briefly with something like anger, but he quickly composed himself. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word was clear. You know what's interesting about this industry, Miss Page? How quickly the conversation turns from achievements to scandals, from inspiring stories to dirty gossip. Why? Because scandals sell better. Because it's easier to destroy than to create. He paused, then continued, looking straight into her eyes. You mentioned taxes. Yes, I had a conflict with the Spanish tax authorities. I settled it. I paid everything that was required. It was a difficult period when I changed countries, advisors, business structure. I made mistakes, like many in my position, but I corrected them. Does that make me a bad person, or just a person? The studio audience began to applaud quietly. Veronica felt the ground slipping from under her feet. A radical move was needed. What about women, Mr. Ronaldo? She asked with feigned naivety. You've had quite a few in your biography. Some have made some pretty serious accusations against you. Others have spoken of your difficult character. What about that? The studio froze. Everyone knew that Veronica had just crossed one of those invisible lines that divide an interview into before and after. Ronaldo sat up slowly in his chair. His face became inscrutable, but something flashed in his eyes that made even the seasoned cameramen exchange glances. You know, Ms. Page, he began quietly, I respect women, all women. My mother, who made me who I am. The mothers of my children, my sisters, my co-workers. I respect them so much that I would never discuss our personal relationships on television for the sake of ratings. He paused and then added, Annie, but since you brought it up, let's talk about something I've never talked about publicly, what it's like to be a single father in front of the world. There was absolute silence in the studio. Veronica didn't even try to hide her shock. Ronaldo had never spoken about his role as a father in this context. This was territory the tabloids could only guess at. When my first son, Cristiano Jr., was born, the world went crazy with speculation. Ronaldo continued. Who is the mother? Why did she give up her parental rights? Why am I keeping this a secret? Everyone felt they had the right to know my most personal circumstances. He looked straight into the camera, as if addressing each viewer personally. The truth is that I vowed to protect my son's privacy and respect the privacy of his biological mother. It was not an easy decision. It was a choice I made knowing that I would be criticized, judged, and rumored. But my son was more important than all of that. Veronica felt awkward. She had planned to corner Ronaldo on his personal life, but instead he was turning the conversation into a deep meditation on parental values. But isn't it strange, she tried to regain control, that a man of your status would choose such an unusual path? Most people in your position, most people in my position, Ronaldo interrupted gently, do what is expected of them. Take the easy way out, the most comfortable way. I have never been the majority, Miss Page, on or off the pitch. He paused as if deciding whether to continue, and then continued with unexpected frankness. Do you know what it's like to put your child to bed when there are dozens of paparazzi outside your gate? Explain to a 4-year-old why people he's never met think they have the right to discuss his ancestry? Teach him to be strong when the whole world is constantly trying to get into your personal affairs? Veronica was silent, not knowing how to react. Ronaldo really did carefully hide this part of his life from the public. These moments never make it into the newspapers, Miss Page, Ronaldo continued. No one sees the nights my son woke up with nightmares after accidentally hearing some dirty theory about his origins. No one sees me explaining to him that it's not the circumstances of his birth that matter, but the person he becomes. No one sees me teaching him to respect women, to respect all people, regardless of their status or origins. The studio froze. Even the most cynical viewers were touched by the sincerity with which Ronaldo spoke about his family. Veronica realized that she was not just losing control of the interview, she was losing the audience's sympathy. A sharp turn was needed. That all sounds very nice, Mr. Ronaldo, she said with a hint of sarcasm. But let's be honest. You're a billionaire. You have an army of nannies, assistants, drivers, security guards. It's a little different from the experience of the average single dad who works full-time and picks up the kids from school himself, isn't it? She thought she had finally caught him in a contradiction, but Ronaldo only smiled sadly. You're right, Ms. Page. I have privileges that many can only dream of. But you know what no assistant or bodyguard can do? Hold my son when he cries. Answer his questions about life. Be there when he takes his first steps in sports. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy what a child really needs. The presence of a parent who truly cares. He paused, then added with unexpected force, and yes, I personally pick up my children from school whenever I can. I personally make them breakfast before big days. I personally help them with their homework. Does that surprise you? That I, despite all my privileges, want to be an ordinary father to my children? Spontaneous applause erupted in the studio. Veronica began to realize that she was losing more than just the interview. She was losing the battle for the audience's sympathy. The man she had intended to portray as a self-absorbed narcissist was turning out to be sincere, profound, and incredibly human. Let's get back to football, Mr. Ronaldo, she tried to change the subject. Many critics say that your style of play has changed over the years, that you've become less dynamic, more old, Ronaldo finished for her with a slight grin. I would say more focused on personal statistics, Veronica clarified diplomatically. You know what's interesting about football, Miss Page? Ronaldo replied. It's how few people understand its evolution. When I was a young player, I could rely on my speed, my feints, my physicality. I could beat 3 defenders and score a beautiful goal. The crowd loved it. The media loved it. But as you get older, you realize that football isn't just about beauty. It's about efficiency. He leaned forward, and his eyes lit up with the same fire that appeared when he spoke about his true passion, acting. I haven't become worse. I've become smarter. I've learned to score goals with less effort. I've learned where exactly to be at the right moment. It's not a coincidence that I continue to score at my age. It's the result of constant adaptation, learning, and improvement. Veronica felt that Ronaldo was once again hijacking the narrative, turning criticism into a lesson on professionalism and evolution. A lot of people say you're selfish on the pitch, she said in a last attempt to elicit an emotional response. That team achievements are less important to you than personal bests. A shadow of irritation flashed across Ronaldo's face, but he quickly pulled himself together. I wonder, he said, how often the word selfish is used to describe men who strive for excellence, and how rarely it is used to describe women who do the same. Are you calling me selfish because I want to be the best? Because I demand it of myself and my teammates? He shook his head. I have scored more goals from assists than anyone in the history of football. I have won team trophies in every league I have played in. I have led my national and club teams to victories that were considered impossible. And after all this, people still dare to call me selfish? There was no aggression in his voice, only genuine bewilderment. Do you know what real selfishness is, Miss Page? It's not the desire for perfection. It's not the desire to win. Real selfishness is using other people as stepping stones to your career. It's the willingness to trample someone's reputation for the sake of a sensational headline. It's the desire to see someone fail simply because their success makes you feel inferior. Veronica realized that this was no longer just an answer to a question, it was an accusation. An accusation aimed at her personally and the entire industry she represented. Mr. Ronaldo, we're just asking questions that interest our audience. She tried to defend herself. It's our job to uncover the unknown sides of celebrities. The unknown sides? Ronaldo asked. Or the most painful? The most vulnerable? The easiest to exploit? He paused, studying Veronica carefully, as if he could see right through her. Do you know what real journalism is, Ms. Page? It is not an attempt to elicit tears or anger on air. It is not a search for dirt to smear across headlines. Real journalism is a pursuit of truth. Complex, multifaceted, sometimes inconvenient truth. Veronica felt herself blushing, not from embarrassment, but from growing anger. Who was he to lecture her on journalism, on the profession to which she had dedicated 2 decades of her life? You seem to forget, Mr. Ronaldo, she said with barely contained irritation, that I am the one asking the questions here. And my next question is, how do you explain the fact that many of your former teammates are saying not the most flattering things about you? She took out her phone and started quoting, "He only thinks about himself. It's unbearable to work with him in the same team. His ego is bigger than his talent." These are all direct quotes, Mr. Ronaldo. How do you comment on this? She thought she had finally broken through his defenses, that now he would lose his composure, start making excuses, or even better, lose his temper. But Ronaldo only nodded thoughtfully, as if she had asked a genuinely interesting question. You know what I've noticed in my career, Miss Page? He said after a pause, that the loudest critics tend to be of 2 types, those who never made it and those who fear they've been forgotten. I won't name names. Unlike some, I respect my colleagues, but I suggest you check who exactly said these things and see how their own careers have panned out. He paused, then added with unexpected sincerity, I'm not perfect, Miss Page. I have my flaws. I can be too demanding, too direct, too focused on the outcome. I can get frustrated when I see someone not giving it their all. And yes, sometimes that creates tension. But you know what's interesting? Many of the people who have really achieved something in life understand this passion. This obsession with perfection. His voice became quieter, but there was a new depth to it. Alex Ferguson, one of the greatest coaches in history, once told me, Cristiano, your obsession is both your blessing and your curse. And he was right. It is what made me who I am, and what sometimes complicates my relationships with people who do not share this obsession. The studio was silent. Even Veronica was impressed by his frankness, but she couldn't let him win this confrontation. Very nice words, Mr. Ronaldo, she said with a fake smile. But let's move on to the really difficult topic, the topic you rarely talk about in public. She paused dramatically. Let's talk about your father. The studio went so quiet you could hear the cameras rolling. Everyone knew Veronica had just crossed an invisible line. Ronaldo's father, José Diniz Aveiro, had struggled with alcoholism for years and died when Cristiano was just 20. It was a subject he almost never discussed publicly. Ronaldo's face froze for a moment. Something like pain flashed in his eyes, but he quickly regained his composure. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. You know what always amazes me about this industry, Miss Page? How easily some people exploit other people's pain for entertainment, as if someone's grief is just another product to sell. He paused, took a deep breath, and when he continued, his voice carried the determination of a man who had decided to say something he had long wanted to say. My father was a complicated man. He struggled with demons that many do not understand. Alcoholism is not a weakness of character, as many people think. It is a disease that destroys not only the one who suffers from it, but also everyone around him. The studio froze. Even Veronica didn't dare interrupt him. I saw my father cry in shame when he couldn't stop. I saw him try to be better, and then fall again. I saw this disease slowly killing him, day after day. And you know what I felt? Not anger, not disgust, but helplessness. Because no matter how much you love someone, you can't win this battle for them. Ronaldo's voice wavered, but he continued. When my father died, I was 20. I was just starting my career. And you know what I regret most? That he didn't see what I achieved. Didn't see the trophies, didn't see his grandson. Didn't see his dream come true that his son would become a great footballer. Ronaldo's eyes filled with tears, but he made no attempt to hide them. For the first time in his career, he allowed millions of viewers to see his real pain. So yes, Ms. Page, you're right. I don't like to talk about my father, not because I'm ashamed of him, but because that pain is still with me. Because every time I lift the trophy, part of me thinks, Dad, I hope you see this, wherever you are. There was no sound in the studio. Many in the audience were furtively wiping away tears. Even the most cynical journalists in the room were touched by the sincerity with which one of the world's most private sports stars spoke about her deepest pain. Veronica sat stunned. She had planned to use the father issue to cause a scandal, to provoke Ronaldo into an emotional outburst. Instead, he had turned the moment into something deeply human and touching, something that made her feel not like a sharp journalist, but like a petty, heartless person. But she was a professional, and she knew the show must go on. With a tight smile and a racing heart, Veronica took one last look at her question cards. There was one more core topic, the sexual harassment allegations that had surfaced in the press years ago. She hesitated for only a second before making her decision. Mr. Ronaldo, she began, lowering her voice to an almost intimate whisper that made the entire studio gasp. Let's talk about Las Vegas in 2009 and why you paid hush money to that woman. The studio was dead silent. The producer in the earpiece was shouting something about a commercial break, but Veronica ignored him. Ronaldo's eyes narrowed slowly, and for the first time all evening, there was something truly dangerous in them. The cold, controlled anger of a man pushed to the limit. The air in the studio seemed thick. After Veronica's question about the events in Las Vegas, there was such a silence that you could hear the lights humming overhead. In the control room, the producer was shouting frantically into the microphone, demanding a commercial break, but the director, mesmerized by what was happening, was slow to give the command. Cristiano Ronaldo sat absolutely still, only his eyes, usually warm and alive, turned into two icy dots. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, but every word seemed to be imprinted on the consciousness of everyone present. You just crossed the line, Miss Page. A simple phrase spoken without raising her voice, but it was as if the temperature in the studio had dropped 10 degrees. Veronica tried to maintain a professional smile, but it looked increasingly strained. We are simply asking questions that interest our audience, Mr. Ronaldo. The public has the right. The public? Ronaldo interrupted, and now there was a note of steel in his voice. Let's not hide behind the public. It's you, Miss Page. It's you who want to make a show out of other people's pain. It's you who are looking for dirt, sensations, scandals. He paused as if giving her a chance to retreat, but Veronica, feeling that she had finally found his weak spot, decided to continue the offensive. The truth can be unpleasant sometimes, Mr. Ronaldo, but didn't you just say that you always tell the truth? So why not tell our viewers about lies? Ronaldo interrupted again, his voice rising. About false accusations that were completely disproved? About a case that was closed due to lack of evidence? About how some people try to profit from someone else's fame? Veronica knew her plan was starting to work. Ronaldo was finally showing emotion. Anger, indignation, hurt pride. Exactly what she had been looking for all along. If you're innocent, she said with mock sympathy, why did you pay money to keep quiet? Innocent people don't usually pay, do they? It was a trap question, and everyone in the studio knew it. If he answered yes, he would admit that there was something that should be kept quiet. If he answered no, he would cast doubt on all the previous harassment cases that had financial compensation. Ronaldo took a deep breath, and for a moment everyone thought he was about to snap, but instead something amazing happened. He slowly straightened up, squared his shoulders, and looked straight into the camera. Not at Veronica, but as if he was addressing the millions of viewers on the other side of the screen. I'd like to say something to everyone watching this interview right now, he began, his voice calm again but filled with unwavering determination. What's happening in this studio right now is not journalism. It's not a search for the truth. It's an attempt to create a scandal at any cost. And you know what? I'm not going to participate in it. He turned to Veronica. You invited me here supposedly to talk about my career, my charities, my life. Instead, you prepared a dossier of rumors, innuendo, and outright lies. You are not interested in the truth, Ms. Page. You are interested in ratings, in clicks, in noise. Veronica tried to get a word in, but Ronaldo raised his hand to stop her. No, now I'm talking. You've asked your questions long enough. Now listen to the answers you don't seem to want to hear. He paused to collect his thoughts and continued. You know what the hardest thing is when you're falsely accused of something? Not the headlines, not the angry comments online, not even the potential financial loss. The hardest thing is explaining to your kids what's going on. Seeing the question in their eyes. Dad, is this true? Did you really do what they say? There was absolute silence in the studio. Even Veronica, who was used to controlling the conversation, could not find words. False accusations don't just destroy careers, Ms. Page. They destroy families. They make children doubt their parents. They make parents feel like they've failed their children. They create trauma that lasts for years. Ronaldo paused again, his gaze fixed on the camera, as if he could see every viewer through it. Yes, I paid, not because I was guilty, but because I knew how the system worked, how the media turned accusations into convictions, how rumors became facts simply by being repeated. I paid to protect my family from this circus, so that my mother wouldn't read these vile things in the papers every morning, so that my children wouldn't hear them from other children at school. He turned to Veronica, and his gaze was so piercing that she involuntarily recoiled. And you know what's most ironic? Even this price for silence didn't work, because people like you keep bringing this up, keep hinting, keep denigrating and destroying, even when the truth has long been established. Veronica, feeling that she was losing control of the situation, tried to return to her usual tactics. Mr. Ronaldo, we are just looking for the truth. If you have done nothing, why not just answer the question? Ronaldo shook his head as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. If you have done nothing, classic tactic. Do you know what it is called in logic? Argumentum ad ignorantium. Argument from ignorance. Assuming guilt and demanding proof of innocence. Instead of presenting proof of guilt, he straightened up, and now there was more than just determination in his voice, but real anger. Righteous, controlled, but obvious. I answered these questions before the relevant authorities. I provided all the necessary evidence. The case was closed. What else do I have to prove? And to whom? To a TV presenter who didn't even bother to read the investigator's conclusion? Veronica turned pale. Ronaldo was right. She had not read the full report, relying only on the sensational excerpts from the tabloids, but her professional pride would not allow her to retreat. Mr. Ronaldo, our viewers. Your viewers deserve the truth, Ronaldo interrupted again. Not innuendo, no scandal, the truth. And the truth is that I never did what I was accused of. And you know it, Miss Page. You know it, but you still decided to bring it up. Why? For ratings? Or simply because you enjoy the feeling of power when you see powerful people writhing under your questions? The studio became so quiet you could hear the air conditioners running. For the first time in her career, Veronica didn't know what to say. Her own tactics had backfired. You know what? Ronaldo suddenly stood up. I think it's time for us to finish this interview. But before I go, I want to say something else. He turned to the studio audience and the cameras. Millions of boys and girls around the world look up to me as a role model. And for many years, I have tried to live up to that. I am not perfect. I have flaws. I have made mistakes. But I have always strived to be better, on and off the field. His voice became softer, but did not lose its strength. And you know what I've learned over the years? That true success isn't about the number of trophies on your shelf. It isn't about the numbers in your bank account. True success is the ability to stay true to yourself, even when the world tries to make you doubt it. It's the ability to stand up for those you love. It's the ability to tell the truth, even when a lie is offered more. Veronica's producer finally stopped demanding a commercial break. Even he realized that something extraordinary was happening, something that went beyond the usual TV interview. One last thing, Ronaldo said, looking directly into the camera. To all the young people watching this right now, remember that your worth is not determined by what other people say about you. It's determined by who you are, by what you believe in, by how you act when no one is looking. He turned to Veronica and said with unexpected gentleness, and to you, Ms. Page, I want to say, I forgive you, not for myself. I'm used to that kind of thing. I forgive you for all those who don't have my voice, my resources, my platform. For all those who have been unfairly vilified for ratings. For all those who couldn't defend themselves the way I can. With that, he took the microphone off and placed it on the table. The studio was completely silent, broken only by the sound of his footsteps as he headed for the exit. And then something incredible happened. First, one person in the audience stood up and started clapping. Then another, and another. Within seconds, the entire studio was standing and applauding. Some in the audience even cried, moved by the sincerity and power of his words. Veronica sat there stunned by what had just happened. The interview that should have been the pinnacle of her career, the triumph of her ruthless style of journalism, had turned into a complete professional fiasco. Not only had she failed to break her star victim, she had found herself in the place of the accused. Ronaldo was already at the door when he suddenly stopped and turned around. By the way, Miss Page, I'd like to tell you and your viewers some news. I was going to announce it at the charity event tomorrow, but I think I'll do it now. The studio fell silent in anticipation. Veronica tensed, not knowing what to expect. For the past 5 years, I have been secretly funding the creation of a rehabilitation center for children who have experienced violence. A center where they can receive not only medical and psychological help, but also legal support, where their voices will be heard, where they will be believed. He paused, looking straight at Veronica. Because I know what it's like to be disbelieved, what it's like to have your truth mean nothing in the face of sensational headlines. And I vowed that I would do everything I could to help those who were truly victims. Not of tabloids, but of real violence. He turned towards the exit again, but then added without turning around. Perhaps, Ms. Page, instead of looking for scandal, you could use your platform for something that actually matters, something that changes lives for the better, rather than destroying them for ratings. And with that, he walked out of the studio, leaving Veronica Page sitting in deafening silence, broken only by the fading applause. The director finally came to his senses and called for a commercial break, but it was too late. Millions of viewers across America had just witnessed one of the country's most ruthless TV hosts, not just defeated, but completely morally destroyed by the man she planned to expose. Behind the scenes, there was a frenzy of activity. Producers were shouting into phones, trying to persuade Ronaldo to return. Assistants were running around with paperwork, trying to figure out how to save the show. The network's director was already calling live on air, demanding an explanation. And inside the studio, Veronica Page sat motionless, staring at the empty chair across from her. Her career, built on destroying reputations, was suddenly in jeopardy. Not because of a huge scandal, not because of incriminating material, but simply because of the truth, spoken with dignity and power. When the cameras came back on after the commercial break, millions of viewers saw something they had never seen before. Veronica Page, the ruthless journalism shark, sitting with her head down in front of an empty guest chair, unsure how to continue a show that had just spiraled completely out of her control. It was at that moment that her assistant Jake, the same terrified young man who had warned her of the risks of this interview, approached her and whispered the words that would be the final nail in the coffin of her career. Veronica, we just got a call from our main advertisers. They're pulling out of the sponsorship. They say they don't want their brands to be associated with... He hesitated, not daring to finish the sentence. With what, Jake? Veronica asked, her voice barely audible. With irresponsible journalism that smears innocent people for the sake of sensationalism, Jake quoted. Their words, not mine. Veronica closed her eyes, Ronaldo's final words still ringing in her ears. Perhaps, Ms. Page, instead of looking for scandal, you could use your platform for something truly important. The teleprompter in front of her blinked, suggesting lines to end the broadcast, but she couldn't see them. For the first time in her 15-year career, Veronica Page didn't know what to say. It had been exactly 3 hours since Cristiano Ronaldo left the American Truth Studio, but the fallout from the interview was already shaking the American media landscape. The hashtag #WalkRonaldoVS was trending on social media, and YouTube views of the interview clips had surpassed 15 million and were growing at a staggering rate. The atmosphere in the network's conference room was that of a funeral parlor. Richard Morton, the network's president, stared grimly at the screen, where rival news programs were mercilessly dissecting the fiasco that had just occurred. The number of unsubscribes from our streaming service has already exceeded 40,000, the digital media manager said grimly. And that's just in the last 2 hours. 4 more major advertisers have called, added the commercial director. They are suspending all contracts until the circumstances are clarified. Morton rubbed his temples, feeling a migraine coming on. Where is Veronica? He asked, although he already knew the answer. In her dressing room, the executive producer replied. Refuses to talk to anyone. Even her agent can't get through to her. Morton nodded. He had been in the television business for more than 30 years and had seen plenty of ups and downs. But what had happened today to Veronica Page, their star, their gold mine, as he called her, was unprecedented. What about the live broadcast at 9? He asked, looking at his watch. There was less than an hour left until the evening news. Jennifer is ready to replace Veronica, the producer replied. But what are we going to say about the interview? The entire internet is talking about nothing else. We can't just ignore it? That's exactly what we'll do, Morton snapped. No mention, no comment. Tell Jennifer to focus on international news. Something about the Middle East, the Chinese economy. Anything but that. A heavy silence fell over the room. Everyone knew that the strategy of ignoring wouldn't work. In the age of social media and viral content, it was impossible to pretend that nothing had happened. Sir, the digital communications director began cautiously. Perhaps we should issue a formal statement. Something about how we value open dialogue and different points of view. A statement? Morton smiled bitterly. What statement can possibly make up for the fact that the entire world just saw our host try to destroy a man's reputation and instead destroy her own? He sighed heavily and added, but you're right. Write something neutral and prepare a statement of mutual consent in case we have to part with Veronica. It's no longer a question of if, but a question of when. While the channel's management tried to cope with the aftermath of the disaster, in another part of the city, in a luxury room at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, Cristiano Ronaldo was talking via video link with his mother. Mom, you shouldn't believe everything you read on the internet, he said in Portuguese, looking at the screen of his tablet, where Dolores Avero's worried face betrayed her anxiety. But they say you just got up and walked out of the interview, Dolores countered. You've never done that. What did that woman say to you? Ronaldo smiled. Even after all these years, all the achievements and trophies, his mother still worried about him as if he were a little boy on the football pitch in Madeira. She asked me about you, he answered honestly, about Dad, about my personal life, about everything that has nothing to do with football or the charity I came to talk about. He didn't mention the most painful moments of the interview. Why upset his mother with details? What did you say? Dolores asked, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. She knew her son too well. The truth, Mom, Ronaldo replied simply. Always the truth. At that moment, there was a knock on the door of the room. Ronaldo apologized to his mother and went to open it. One of his assistants stood on the threshold, looking both nervous and embarrassed. Sorry to bother you, Mr. Ronaldo, but she insists on meeting you. She says she won't leave until you agree to talk. Who? Ronaldo asked, although he already guessed the answer. Veronica Page, the assistant confirmed. She's down in the lobby. No cameras, no crew, alone. Ronaldo raised his eyebrows in surprise. The last thing he expected after today's interview was for Veronica Page to show up at his hotel, and without her usual entourage of cameramen and producers. Tell her I'll be down in 5 minutes, he decided after a short thought. Returning to the video call, he saw his mother's worried face. Christian, what's going on? She asked. It's okay, Mom, he reassured her. I just need to finish something. I'll call you back later, okay? After saying goodbye to his mother, Ronaldo stood motionless for a few minutes, collecting his thoughts. Why had Veronica Page come to him? What could she possibly want after her career had all but collapsed on live television? Revenge? An apology? Another shot at a sensational interview? Wearing a simple white shirt and jeans instead of the elegant suit he had worn for the interview, Ronaldo walked down to the hotel lobby. Recognizing him, the security guards nodded respectfully and pointed toward a private area, fenced off from prying eyes. There, hunched in a chair, sat Veronica Page. Without her professional makeup, without her signature jacket, and with her hair down, she looked different, smaller, more vulnerable, more human. When she looked up and saw Ronaldo, her face was a blur of emotions. Embarrassment, shame, fear, and surprisingly, relief. Mr. Ronaldo, she began, rising to her feet. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Ronaldo nodded silently, studying her with his eyes. Perhaps we should talk somewhere more private, he suggested, gesturing toward the hotel restaurant. I'm sure security can find us a secluded table. Veronica nodded, and a few minutes later they were sitting in the far corner of the restaurant, separated from the other customers by an elegant screen. The waiter brought water and tactfully left, having received a sign from Ronaldo that they were not yet ready to order. So, Ronaldo began, looking at the woman opposite him. What brings you here, Miss Page? Veronica took a deep breath, as if gathering her strength before jumping into the icy water. I came to apologize, she said, and those 3 words seemed to cost her an incredible amount of effort. What happened today, what I did, it was unprofessional, unethical, and just wrong. Ronaldo remained silent, allowing her to continue. You know, I've done hundreds of interviews in 15 years in this business, Veronica continued, looking at her hands. Politicians, celebrities, criminals, heroes. I've talked to them all. And along the way, I lost something. I lost the understanding that behind every question, behind every exposure, there are real people, real lives. She looked up, meeting Ronaldo's gaze. You taught me a lesson today that I will never forget, and I'm not sure I can apologize enough for the pain I caused you and your family. Ronaldo studied her face, trying to determine how sincere her words were. Years in the spotlight had taught him to recognize falsehood, and he saw none in Veronica's eyes now. Only weariness, shame, and a strange mixture of despair and relief, as if she had finally shed a heavy burden she had carried for too long. Why do you do this? He asked finally. Not apologies. That's understandable. I mean your style of journalism. These attempts to corner a man, to make him break, to strip him naked in front of millions. Why? Veronica was silent for a long time, as if this simple question had never occurred to her before. I started out as a reporter, she said finally. Wrote about local police corruption, about environmental pollution, about real problems of real people. And you know what? Nobody cared. My salary barely covered the rent, and only a few hundred people read my articles. She paused, remembering. Nah, and then I did my first exposing interview, made a famous politician lose his cool on live TV. And suddenly I became a star. Ratings soared, my salary doubled, people started recognizing me on the street. Success. It's addictive. I became addicted to that feeling of power, to the adrenaline, to the ability to manipulate even the most powerful people. Ronaldo nodded. He understood the addiction to success better than most people. And you never thought about the price of this success? He asked quietly. I did, Veronica admitted, especially when I saw careers crumble after my interviews. Families fall apart. People who spent years building their reputations lost everything in one evening. But I told myself that this was the price of truth, that the public had a right to know, that I was simply asking the questions that everyone wanted to ask but was afraid to ask. She smiled bitterly. How ironic that today I found myself in the place of my victims, that the whole world saw how I lost control, how my own tactics turned against me. Ronaldo remained silent, giving her the opportunity to speak fully. My career is over, Veronica continued without self-pity, simply stating the fact. The channel has already prepared a statement about my voluntary departure by mutual consent. Advertisers are breaking contracts. My social networks are filled with threats and insults. Even my parents called to say how ashamed they are of me. She looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. And you know what's weirdest? I feel relieved, like I can finally stop playing a role that was never really me. Ronaldo looked thoughtfully at the woman across from him. He had seen many lows in his career, teammates who succumbed to the pressure, stars who burned out in the glow of their own glory, talents who destroyed themselves from within. And he had learned to distinguish between those who fell without a chance to rise again, and those for whom the fall became the beginning of a new journey. What will you do now? He asked finally. Veronica shrugged. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe I'll go back to real journalism, to stories that really matter. Or I'll just disappear for a while, try to remember who I was before all this. She paused, then added, and I also wanted to ask, that rehabilitation center for children you were talking about, is it true? Or did you just say that to... It's true, Ronaldo confirmed. We're opening in 2 months. Initially, we planned to do it without much publicity, but now, after today, I think there will be more attention than I expected. Veronica nodded, and something like determination flashed in her eyes. Mr. Ronaldo, I understand that you have no reason to trust me or want to have anything to do with me, but is there any way I can help with this project? Not as a journalist, just as someone who wants to do something worthwhile. Ronaldo looked at her carefully, trying to discern the true motives behind the offer. Redemption? An attempt to restore his reputation? Or a genuine desire to change the direction of his life? Why? He asked simply. Veronica was silent for a long time, formulating her answer. Because you were right, she finally said. That true success isn't about the number of trophies or the sensational headlines. It's about the ability to stay true to yourself. And today I realized that I lost that ability a long time ago. Maybe it's time to get it back. Before Ronaldo could answer, his phone vibrated. He apologized and looked at the screen. It was his agent, whose call he could not ignore. I'm sorry, he said to Veronica. I have to answer. He walked away a few steps and listened to his agent speak with growing excitement. When he returned to the table, his face was inscrutable. Did something happen? Veronica asked, noticing the change in his expression. Ronaldo hesitated, as if deciding whether to share this information with her. Then, having come to some internal decision, he said, Interview. It became the most viewed in the history of the channel. More than 4 million views on official platforms alone, and another 100 million on unofficial ones. Veronica turned pale. They watch me fail. No. Ronaldo shook his head. They're not looking at your collapse. They're looking at the truth. A moment of authenticity in a sea of falsehood. A man who refused to play by the rules of a game where truth doesn't matter. He paused and then added, and perhaps they are looking at a journalist who, for the first time in a long time, has finally shown a real reaction, real emotions. There was no mockery or malice in his words, only a statement of the fact that Veronica herself was beginning to realize her failure as a ruthless TV presenter could be the beginning of something more sincere and valuable. As for your offer to help with the center, Ronaldo continued, returning to the interrupted conversation, I'll think about it. But first, perhaps you should decide for yourself who you want to be next. What mark do you want to leave in this world? At that moment, the restaurant manager approached their table, looking confused and worried. Mr. Ronaldo, I apologize for disturbing you, but there is a crowd of journalists outside. Someone has informed the press that you and Miss Page are meeting here. They are demanding comment. Veronica turned even paler. God, they think this is some kind of conspiracy, or a continuation of the show. Or they just want their share of sensations. Ronaldo finished for her. Nothing new. He turned to the manager. Is there another way out? Through the kitchen, he nodded. I can arrange it. Thank you, Ronaldo said. And when the manager had left, he turned to Veronica. What would you prefer? To fight the press sharks or to quietly leave through the back door? He put much more into this simple question than just the option of leaving the restaurant. It was a choice of path, to continue living under the cameras, in a world of sensations and scandals, or to find another way of existence, another use for his talents. Veronica looked into his eyes for a long time, as if searching for the answer to the question she had been asking herself all her life. Then she stood up resolutely. You know, Mr. Ronaldo, I've spent 15 years creating stories from other people's lives. Maybe it's time to start creating my own. Ronaldo smiled for the first time in a long, exhausting day. Then let's go through the front door, he said, standing up. If we're going to start over, let's do it with our heads held high. As they emerged from the restaurant and came face to face with a horde of journalists, the flashes of the cameras were so bright that they momentarily blinded them. Dozens of microphones reached out to them. Dozens of voices shouted questions. Mr. Ronaldo, was this a setup? Anyway, Miss Page, are you resigning? What did you discuss? Will there be a sequel? Ronaldo raised his hand and the crowd, to Veronica's surprise, instantly fell silent. Even now, after everything that had happened, his natural charisma and authority made people listen. We have no comment, he said calmly. We're just two people who've had a tough day. Sometimes after a tough conversation, you need another one, this time without cameras and microphones. We both said everything we wanted to say on the air. The rest is between us. With these words, he nodded slightly to Veronica and headed for the exit. The crowd parted before him, like the waters of the Red Sea before Moses. Veronica followed him, feeling the gaze of her former colleagues, who yesterday were afraid to contradict her, and today were ready to tear her to pieces for the sake of a sensational headline. When they reached the street, Ronaldo stopped and extended his hand to her. Good luck, Miss Page. I hope you find your way. The real way. Veronica shook the outstretched hand, feeling a strange calm that she had not experienced for many years. Thank you, Mr. Ronaldo, for a lesson I will never forget. They went their separate ways. He to the waiting limousine, she to the taxi she had called in the restaurant. But both knew that this day had changed them forever. In her taxi, looking out the window at the New York night, Veronica took out her phone and opened her email. Among the hundreds of angry messages and demands for explanations, there was one that caught her attention. It was from a small independent publication specializing in investigative journalism. They were offering her a job, not as a TV star, but as an experienced journalist who could cover the stories that really matter. At the end of the letter was a phrase that made her smile through her tears. We are not looking for those who have never fallen, but those who have found the strength to rise and become better. Meanwhile, in his limousine, Ronaldo scrolled through messages from friends and colleagues. Most expressed support, some admired his poise and dignity, but one message gave him pause. It was from Javier, a boy in his charity who had survived the horrors of domestic violence and was now, thanks to Ronaldo's help, graduating with honors. I saw your interview today, Javier wrote, and for the first time I wasn't embarrassed to tell my friends what happened to me. If you can tell the truth in front of millions, so can I. Thank you for showing me that there is strength not in silence, but in the truth. Ronaldo felt a lump in his throat. Sometimes the darkest moments of our lives become a light for others, he thought. Sometimes what seems like the end is just the beginning. The interview that should have destroyed his reputation instead showed the world what was always inside him. Not just a sports star, not just a billionaire, but a man with deep values, with a story, with a heart. A man who, having gone through poverty, loss, and endless trials, did not lose his essence. At the American Truth Office, the meeting was still going on. Richard Morton watched the screen, where the interview's ratings continued to rise at a staggering rate. This may be the end of the Veronica Page era, he said thoughtfully, but it could also be the beginning of something new, something more authentic. His assistant raised his eyebrows in surprise. What are you talking about, sir? Morton smiled for the first time in this long, crisis-ridden day. About real journalism, Mike. About what we all once aspired to, before we chased ratings and scandals. About what people, as it turns out, still want to see. He turned to the team. I want you to rethink our entire concept, from scratch. What if we started making programs that don't destroy reputations, but explore people's true stories? What if, instead of canned questions, we started actually listening to our guests? What if... At that moment, he was interrupted by a phone call. He glanced at the screen and frowned. It was the president of the media holding that owned the channel. Morton speaking, he replied, bracing himself for the inevitable dressing down for failing his flagship show. But instead of an angry tirade, he heard an inspired voice. Richard, have you seen the numbers? It's crazy. Page's interview with Ronaldo broke every viewing record in the history of our company. I just spoke to 3 new advertisers. They want to be part of it. They're talking about a new era of authenticity in media. Whatever happens, whatever Page's career turns out to be, that interview was a turning point not just for her, but for the entire industry. People are tired of phoniness, Richard. They want real emotion, real stories, real people. Morton sat stunned, phone still pressed to his ear, as Cristiano Ronaldo's face appeared on every screen in the room. Live from the official press approach outside the hotel. Today we all witnessed what happens when the truth breaks through the noise, he said in a firm, confident voice, looking straight into the camera. Each of us makes a choice every day, a choice between what is easy and what is right, between what is popular and what is true. Today showed me that the world is ready for the truth, for authenticity, and that gives me hope. The applause outside the hotel was deafening, and even the most cynical of journalists found themselves clapping along with everyone else. It wasn't just the end of an interview, it was the end of an era, and the beginning of a new one.